welcome to Sanditon Chronicles. We're here with Janis today, and we are going to be recapping episode 3 for you. And just like every week, we want to let you know that if you do want to take part in our podcast and you want to be talking with us like Janis is, and Janis will be one of our regular interviewers with us, but let us know. We'll put our email in the description, and we'll put our email with all of our links, and you can reach out to us. We would love to have you. I think Janis likes doing it.
Yes, I do. It's fun.
It gives you someone to talk to Sanditon about. So, and I enjoy that. Yeah, I enjoy not talking to myself in a basement. So
it's a little more interesting to have an interaction.
It is, yeah. I think it's more fun to listen to when you have someone too. So We're just gonna dive right in. Let's start talking episode 3. I did take some notes, but I tried to not make them like full sentence notes, just little jumping off points. So I'm not
me too.
So it doesn't take 3 hours like it did the last time we did a recap. So the first note that I have is obviously the very first scene in episode 3 is Sydney's waking up hammered in a tavern.
Yeah.
Well, at the very least hungover, but I'm pretty sure he's still a little bit drunk.
Yeah.
And Crow is my favorite in that scene.
Yes, but I also really love what the first thing he says, show some mercy. It's rudely early. I need to order one of those cups.
I was just going to bring that up. Who makes those cups?
The Sanditon Sisterhood.
Oh, is that?
Yeah. If you go to their, I know you can look at it through Instagram. They have a link to the place where they sell them. Redbubble, I think is the name of it. Redbubble.com.
So what I'll do in this podcast too is in the description, I'll put a link to the Sanditon Sisterhood shop for those cups. And they make bags too, don't they? Bags. I get made fun of for how I say that.
Yeah.
But I'll put a link to the Sanditon Sisterhood shop in the bottom so you can buy some cool stuff. And I know Sydney's not here anymore, but he was still Sydney, so we can still buy that.
And he was still in the show.
Exactly. So I love what Crow says when I didn't write down the exact line because I thought I'll remember it. But he says, oh my gosh, he says, isn't that what Charlotte said about you last night? Is that how he says it, Janis?
Yeah, he says, just a second, I actually have the line.
I knew you would.
He's give me half a second and I'll get to it. He says, I told you he'd still be here. And then he says, what a shame.
Look at the state of him, Babbers.
Yes, that's it.
But then he says, what does he say about what Charlotte said about him?
Is that what Miss Haywood said when she ran into you by the coves?
I love Crow. I think he is just such comic relief, but he's so subtle about it.
It'd be nice if he comes back because,
yes,
if he doesn't, they're going to have to find somebody else to be that.
I don't know that they can find someone to fill Crow's shoes other than Mark Needham.
No, but I mean to be comic relief. But
yeah, that's true.
Not to fill his shoes. But
the other thing that I love about that opening scene, because it's from there until we see Charlotte in the Trafalgar house, the music right there is that's fantastic.
Yes, it really is. And that I said that's the boys are back in town music. Isn't that the name of it?
Yep, I think so. And I mean, Ruth Barrett and Don Jones do a great job throughout the whole series. But there's something, it's almost like steampunky, which is fun. And that's something that Ollie Blackburn used to describe the bathtub, which is in this episode, was steampunk. So I don't know, everything just fits so nicely together. And that music, I just kind of want just that track.
And it's a combination with sort of folky, English folk music.
Yeah, they did such a good job with that music. And every time I rewatch an episode, I think that.
Yes, and I like just listening to the music by itself.
When I was starting up the podcast and I was doing all the promoting and I was typing up all the things and I was contacting all the cast and crew, that's what I had my Amazon Music going, and it was just that soundtrack on repeat. It was just, I don't know, just like relieving. I don't know why.
Yes.
So the next note I have after that is, and I know that there's other things that happen there, but the next note I have of import is when Charlotte's hiding. Right. Well, actually,
oh no! Wait a minute! You missed
Mary
that
says.
You missed that whole scene between Mary and Charlotte when Charlotte's staring at Sydney's.
Did you find anything impressive?
Yes.
That's in my note with the music, so I thought we covered that already because I just wrote that music right after it, and I was like, oh, done with that note.
No, anything impressive catch your eye.
Yep. And then they shoot to him.
Yeah. That was great editing.
That's so depictive of what you see in her face at the end of episode 2, that there's this, it's like she's a little bit shy, but she's excited, she's embarrassed, but she also, I mean, I don't think she knows if she does like it or not, but she obviously does.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good on Rose Williams' part too, of how she just seemed befuddled.
And one of those interviews I saw with Chris, that plays Tom, Chris Marshall, he was talking about what wonderful comic timing Kate has, who plays Mary, of course. And you get it right there in that scene.
And the next thing we see is Charlotte hiding under the table when Sydney comes in. And the other thing with the music is someone else I think there's a whole Twitter account dedicated to Sydney's pants, isn't there?
I think so.
Or at least the name has something to do with Sydney's pants.
His breathing, yeah.
And that's where he's wearing the black leather. And he wears it when he first comes in down, but I'm pretty sure he's wearing black leather in that scene too. And I like that that's depictive of how he's feeling. I just like how they did a really good job with costuming to flow that with his moods and his emotions, and how he's, even the more he feels for Charlotte, even in that episode, in episode 3, his outfit changes colors, it changes his fabric.
Well, and that was probably, I would think it was intended to, when that he got up that morning, he was going to travel to London, right? So that was probably partially traveling clothing.
Yeah. But do we think that he planned on it, or do we think that Babington and Crow decided that morning, hey, we're going to leave, and pulled him up? Because when they pull him up in the tavern, they say, let's get some devil kidneys in you and we're going to leave, basically is what they say.
Right. I mean, they were the ones behind leaving right then, but Sydney intended to go with them.
Yeah. But do you think he knew that they were going to go that morning though?
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know. They probably, who knows what, or if he remembered from the night before what was said.
I wish they played up that scene and there was a deleted scene of that, because I'd like to know what Sydney had told them about, because he obviously was talking about the Cove quite a bit. And the way they were ribbing him about Charlotte, that he had to have let something go about how he felt about Charlotte.
Yeah, so yeah. And just so funny that if you hadn't put that 5th bottle down me, his line,
And Justin Young wrote episode 3, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
So maybe we should reach out to him and be like, hey, can you write that little scene for us?
Yeah. When he's done writing all the other scenes that he's writing.
Got time. He's not busy.
Maybe between 2 and 3,
He is writing the premiere for 2 and 3. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that. Was that on Twitter today?
IMDb. They listed him as they list him as producer for episode 2 and 3, executive producer, and they also list him as writing the opener for season 2 and season 3. It's the only ones he has listed for season 2 and season 3. It's just the first episode so far.
Oh, for the new season?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
So he'll write the openers for those for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm excited for what he's going to do.
Yes. Okay. So going on, I love how he says popping up when least expected. Like, obviously that's a funny line. Yes. But the way he looks at her, because he focuses on her for a minute and he has this really intense glare. And then the moment she's out of the room, he almost like breathes. When he starts talking to Tom. So I think that's such a good, and that's not a directed thing. That's just Theo James being Sydney. So I really like that depth it gives the character, that he almost couldn't breathe when she was in the room. Like, she took up all the oxygen in the room.
Well, and I kind of think too that that's one of the reasons, at least for me, it's one of the reasons why I cannot see anybody else playing Sydney.
There is no other Sydney.
Yeah. I mean, if we have to live without him, we're going to live without the character.
Yeah. But I think Theo James did such justice to Sydney Parker that
absolutely
any other Sydney Parker is just not going to compare.
He really embodied him.
Mm-hmm. Episode 3, we watch him start from gruff Sydney, beginning to soften, to by the end fully softened, and I just it's so brilliantly done in this episode.
It really is, and I don't know if you remember in one of the interviews, and this is what I called this episode, was the ice melts a little. And he talked in this interview about how in episode 3, the ice is melting between them. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, we know next week, the next episode, it all comes crashing down. But
so we see that part, and then the next scene, obviously, we we see Tom and him talk a little bit. But I tried to just take notes on the big things. So if you want to talk about anything I don't bring up, feel free to interject and do that. But
well,
the next,
I loved in that one scene you were just talking about how he pops up and she's like, you're always popping up where least expected, you know. Obviously a reference to the Coves.
Yeah. And it's the brilliancy behind that line is that it's obviously Sydney who popped up, but he tells Charlotte, you pop up on least expected. And she was completely taken by, so it's almost, that line is almost, hey, do you remember when you saw me naked?
Yes, it is. And it's the irony of it.
Mm-hmm. And he's trying, I think he's trying to pull that reaction from Charlotte because we talked about this last time because you and I did recap for 2 together, right?
Yes.
We talked about that smirk that he had when she saw him, right? So we know that he liked that she liked it. So it's almost like he's trying to see how uncomfortable he can make her to gauge how much she liked it after that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So are you going to talk about Charlotte and Mary walking on the beach?
That's my next note. Yep.
Great. Go ahead.
And I think I talked about this a little bit when I was talking about Mary and Tom together about the dynamics of the relationship. And that was not last week, because last week was a lie, but the week before that, I talk about sometime in there, I talk about those two. But I think it's a really, really sad scene. Obviously, Charlotte is there to encourage her and make her feel better, but you can just almost like hear Kate Ashfield is really good too about embodying the character. And I think the tone, because in different points, especially in this episode, you hear the different tone and the different facial expressions she gives Mary. And in that scene, her tone is so despondent. It's sometimes I worry that he's going to die with the plan still clutched in his hand. And it's just, you feel that loss that she had because her husband's no longer there.
Right. He's, definitely he's completely preoccupied.
Mm-hmm. Was there something else you wanted to say about that scene?
Nope. No. I mean, we just know that right after that, they come back to the house and Tom leaves for parts unknown.
Yeah. There was one thing I loved about that scene when they come back, and I didn't really notice it before because I always focus on like the big characters. But when you look at the kids,
the children are wonderful.
Yeah, the oldest Parker girl, when she was in there, she's holding Mary's hand. You could tell that they aren't infringing. The creators of the show aren't infringing any rules on them. They're just. It seems like the direction is just be a kid. Because
absolutely.
Her head is just kind of like this, and she's not focused on anything, and she's just looking around. And the other thing I love is that their hair is really windswept. Like they don't try to make them look perfect, like in your average Hollywood movie. They let them be kids, and I don't know why I didn't really notice that before, but I noticed it today as I was rewatching it, and I love that they gave them that ability to do that.
I think it was Lisa Clark when she did her Q&A, talked about the fact that the kids never did 2 scenes in a row the same way, but they just had to go with it, but they were so genuine and it was really good. And I just hope that's one of the reasons I think they have to skip 2 years in the story where they pick up the story is because please bring those kids back.
Yeah. So the scene after they come back is the painting scene. And boy, oh boy, do I wish nobody showed me that picture.
Yeah, none of us needed to see what that picture was. You're so curious till you find out, and then you're like, for anybody listening to this, I hope they don't even bother to try and see it.
Don't look at it. It's
gross. There's a reason why she reacted the way she did.
Yes, well, because that was in our Facebook group, in the Sanditon Chronicles Facebook group, and we had Georgiana and Crystal Clark were our spotlight week one week. One of my questions was, what do you think she's painting? And I said, I think it's a nice fruit basket. And people were like, oh no, that's not what it is. And they showed me the picture, and I was so weirded out. That's what it was. And because I had looked it up before and I didn't find it.
No, there's a reason they didn't show it. It's funny to me that they even painted it, but
I wonder why they did that, because you can see like the edges of black in there. I wonder if they ever actually intended to show it, or if they just wanted to give them a visual to react to.
I don't know, but it worked.
Yeah, I would react like Mrs. Griffiths, I think. I would.
And the funny thing is that is the first scene that Crystal filmed, was that scene.
Oh, was it?
Sanditon.
What a
Yeah,
nice
that was,
entrance into,
yeah.
into
The
Sanditon.
beginning,
The other thing
funny.
too is that message that he's talking about. And I was watching that scene with my daughter today, my oldest daughter, and she was like, "Wait, what is he saying?" I mean, on one hand, he's right. I mean, God is God, so he knows more than we do. But on the other hand, his sermon just seems so
The
judgmental and
opposite. Yeah,
so really. And I know that's what the preachers were back then, but still,
yeah,
like in
yeah.
a way
No,
that
I'm with you.
Mrs. Griffiths is fawning over him, and it just.
Yeah,
The other thing too to look at is the Beaufort sisters when they see
yeah.
Georgiana's painting. You notice they aren't scandalized.
No, they think it's funny. Of course, they
Mm-hmm.
giggle about everything.
So then the next scene after that is in the town, right on the street when Babington walks up to Esther and Edward. I love that Edward, first of all, he just toys with Esther so deeply, and he's trying so hard to get her to admit how much fealty she'll give him, and it's just so wrong of him. And when
Yes,
he's like, what's wrong with him? Of course he knows why she won't go for him, but he wants her to say it. He needs her to say this improper thing.
right, right.
And
To
you know he
validate
doesn't
him.
truly love her, or he wouldn't be doing what he's doing. So
Right.
you have to wonder if it's a source of, I mean, obviously it's manipulation, but I think it goes deeper than that. I wonder why he does that.
It's control.
Yeah. And so I like when Babbers goes up to her and he says, "Do I have permission to write to you?" And her response was so gold. She says, "You can if," oh my gosh. See,
He
this is why I
says,
take detailed notes.
why do you persist when you're treated so badly?
Before that, because he
Oh,
says, "Then I shall." And then she says, "Babbers,
yes.
or Babington, why do you persist?"
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But she says, if you enjoy disappointment, is what she says. And he's like, "All right, then
Right.
I will."
Yeah. And he talks about maybe something, something about something worth having is um requires effort. I'm not using the right
Yeah.
exact line.
Nothing
But
worth having is without effort. And
yeah.
she says, very prettily said, "But to no avail."
Yeah.
And that makes him
That's
more
right.
endeared to her. And I love that about Babington, because you know that in that moment, the reason he's doing that is because he finds worth in her. He
Yes.
sees her value the way that nobody else does.
Yeah.
And I think
That's
she
right.
almost gets meaner at that point to him, because I think there's probably something that's opening up there, because Edward doesn't treat her like that.
No.
Edward
No.
doesn't pursue her.
Yes, that's right. And it, right before that, though, right before that conversation is when Sydney gets the note about
Yep. Georgiana.
Georgiana, right? And Crow's line is very funny.
I forgot that line was in there, and I was watching it with my 10-year-old. Like, oh, shoot.
So did you have to explain something?
No, she didn't hear it.
Oh, that's good.
I was having them
Well, it
clean the
helps
living
that
room
they
at that
have a
point.
British accent,
It's true.
Oh,
What does he say? He says, "It's just like having a bastard, only less fun, slightly less fun to come by."
Yes, that's exactly what he says.
Seriously, I love Crow so much. But the other aspect to look at too is Babington's face when it happens.
Yes.
Because he's not just like, "Really, you have to go again?" He's truly bothered for Sydney that he has to stay and deal with this. It's almost like, why can't she just be normal? Is almost like what you see happening in his head.
Right. Or why can't she not leave us alone to be by ourselves?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But
so that brings us to the next scene of when Sydney goes into her room. And I love that you can actually hear the stomach gurgling.
Hear the what?
You can actually hear his stomach gurgling. That might have been sound effects put in later, but I love that you can hear it. And then she says, "Is something ailing you?" "Yes, something's ailing me. You are."
Not the 5 bottles of whatever they drank the night before.
I just love that line. I love the whole interaction, because I think that Georgiana takes pleasure in the fact that he is bothered. And I don't think it bothers her that he says that to her. I think she's just delighting that he's suffering.
Oh, yes. I think you're entirely right about that.
And I think it makes his rebuke to her a little softer for her, a little easier for her to take, that he's hurting.
Yeah.
And then right after that, he runs into Charlotte. Now, why do you think he starts? Because at first it was like a joke, kind of, when he says popping out what least suspected. But throughout the episode, the more he sees her, the more mad he gets. Why do you think that is? Because he was mad when he bumped into her in the hallway.
Okay, I think it's because he is actually feeling something. He's still going back to that scene where he came out of the water and found her there in the coves, and I think that, so he's irritated. He wants to put this and that incident sort of somewhat out of his mind, but he keeps bringing it up every time he sees her. So I don't know. It's interesting. Exactly. I don't know what that character had in mind at that point. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it was feelings. It's like, it raised all those feelings.
And I like the point that you just said, that he was trying to forget her, because even though he tries to bring it up, I mean, he is trying to forget her, but she is everywhere he is.
Yeah.
And it's because everyone that's important to him is also important to her.
Right. Right. And when he bumps into her in the hallway, he says, "Can I not escape you?"
Yeah. Her expression is so confused. Rightly like so, because she didn't do anything wrong. He was the one who showed up naked. She didn't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, which I love what their conversation later about that. And then when right after that, she walks in to Georgiana, and she says, he thinks you're a bad influence on me. No greater incentive for us to be friends. It's such a great line,
And so it shows you kind of the immaturity of Georgiana too. That's her goal now. Is, I think at that moment her goal was to annoy Sydney at every turn she possibly could.
Well, right, and that's a teenager.
I always forget she was a teenager.
I mean, she's 19. I realize.
She is, though, isn't she? She's 18, isn't she? 18 or 19?
In the character, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's 19 at that point in the story, which is still, that's right at the age you're trying to struggle to get your freedom.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And so we see that, but then Georgiana also asks her, "What is your opinion of Sydney?" Now, it strikes me as odd that she even cares what Charlotte's opinion is. And I'm wondering if she asks that because she wants to know how to get Charlotte on her side to sort of punish him, or if she wants to know because she wants to ensure she doesn't have feelings for him.
I think she's doing that because she wants to validate how she feels about him. Georgiana wants to validate how she feels about Sydney, so she wants Charlotte to say something similar.
That makes sense. And what Charlotte says is, "He confounds me."
I don't hardly know what to make of him. Well, understandable what she's been through already.
Poor Georgiana, I can't get anything. And then, so we see Dr. Fuchs is coming, right? And Tom goes to Lady Denham's house to say he's coming. I love what she says. Often I don't need to meet a person. Often a name is enough, and I don't much care for the name Dr. Fuchs at all.
Right, to form an opinion. I don't have to meet somebody, which is really fun. She's funny. That is such a great line. The other thing that she says in there, maybe it's later, she says that about, never mind, forget it.
But it shows the absurdity of her character. She's so grounded in power and in having the control, but she's also so rooted in absolute absurdity to gain and keep that control. She will make up literally anything in her mind and say it out loud if it means that she gets to make the shots and call the shots.
Needless to say, there is no filter, and her opinion is the only one that counts.
I wonder if she'll be softer in season 2 and 3 now that Esther's married and Edward's gone.
I'm not sure, but I
hope not.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe soft enough to let Edward come back, but
yeah. But I hope in all essentials she remains the same. Because I love Lady Denham.
I can't imagine she's going to change that much. I mean,
she's old enough that she's not going to do it.
I love the insights that she gives later in episode, I don't know, episode 7 or 8, where she must have been 8.
Oh, where she's talking to Esther about her lost love.
Her history.
Yeah, that's 8. So anyway, after we see Tom talking to Lady Denham, we almost immediately after that meet Dr. Fuchs. And I love the interaction between him and Mary and Charlotte's reaction to that meeting.
Yes, it's wonderful. It's just like, You can see Charlotte has never seen anybody like him before.
And she's also like, her concern is for Mary too, because if you watching her, she's just kind of like watching from his hand to Mary, and she's not outright like having the same facial expression I am, but she's very concerned for her friend. Mary is making the facial expression I was, where she's like, what is happening right now? Why are you doing this?
Yeah,
and I love that he almost ignored Charlotte.
Yes. Well, I mean, he did very briefly, but of course he knew who the person was that he needed to cozy up to, because that's Tom's wife,
I don't know that that's why he was doing it though.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think Dr. Fuchs really cared about, because look at how he talked to Lady Denham. She's really the one he needed to impress.
That's true.
He was pretty bold with her. I think that he really just was like instantly had a crush on Mary Parker. I think he really thought she was incredibly beautiful. I mean, which is right. Kate Ashwood was beautiful
and mature, not old. I don't mean that, but she was a beautiful, mature woman.
And I love the comparison of Charlotte's reaction to Tom's reaction, because Tom was almost like, oh, he likes my wife. That's great. That's a good start. But
yeah,
he doesn't just like your wife. He's fawning over your wife.
With Charlotte's limited exposure, that she has never come up on somebody like this.
Absolutely. I mean, have any of us really?
Yeah, really.
I don't really have limited exposure. I don't think I've ever met a Dr. Fuchs.
And that won't bother you.
Yeah. And then after that, we see Sydney, right?
We do, but I have to back up just 1 minute, because there's a line that Tom says that I absolutely love, and I would guess that a lot of the public don't catch it. And that's when he says, once she sees him in action, she'll undergo a nothing short of a Damascene conversion.
I say that line to myself a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know what Damascene means, though.
Huh?
I will openly admit I don't know what Damascene means. I mean, I can imagine based on the context of the question.
Okay, well, I will explain this to you, because that's why I think most of the public don't get it. It's the road to Damascus conversion.
Oh.
Damascene is Damascus, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so... The scales will fall from her eyes.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. That does make it better.
Point, the scales went on Paul's eyes in the original event.
He wasn't I mean the whole thing together, the Damascene conversion, because
absolutely.
When Paul was officially converted was when the guy prayed and his stuff fell off his
when he saw Jesus. Yeah.
That makes it so much better. I mean, I like the line as it was, but that makes it better for me. I like that.
Yeah.
So the next scene we see is Sydney reading the paper, and Charlotte starts talking. She thinks she's talking to Tom, and then Sydney says, where's my note? He says, she says, well, if you don't want to be bothered, perhaps you might try going somewhere alone. Well, I tried that. It didn't quite work out.
Somewhere more secluded. It's such a great word.
And the way he looks at her when he says it is so steamy.
Yeah.
It's almost obscene. So then the next scene are two of my favorite people, or at least one of my favorite people, is Arthur and Diana walking with Charlotte. And first of all, I love all of the crazy things she talks about having. But that she says, and you must tell him about that most thunderous bellyache you had. And it couldn't have been hunger. I only just polished off an 8-bird roast. I just love Arthur. I just love him.
And it's funny that they came obviously a different way to Sanditon House that episode than they did the episode before, because they weren't all breathless and worn out before they got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were coming a different way, not along the cliffs instead of on that path.
Maybe they weren't as worn out because a doctor was going to be there. So the excitement overrode everything else.
Yeah.
Those two are so delightfully absurd.
More exciting than a pineapple.
It's true. And then when we get to Lady Denham's house, I noticed for the first time, and I always kind of noticed what Sydney was doing, but I never noticed that there's a similarity to the expression on his face and Charlotte's face. Charlotte's is more soft and Sydney's is more angry, but they both have a sort of skeptical. They both seem skeptical of the abnormality of Fuchs.
Yes.
Sydney just is kind of like, I don't need to be here to see this insanity. And Charlotte's kind of looking at her like this, like, what are you doing? So,
and also Charlotte, don't you think Charlotte is just like, she knows that Lady Denham does not like doctors, so she doesn't hold out any hope.
She did say that, didn't she? That she's never heard her say a good word about doctors.
Right, that she'd heard her speak most derisively. That wasn't the word, but anyway.
Yeah. No, I think it was, wasn't
it? Close, but not. Anyway, she knew that Lady disparagingly is the word.
That's what it was.
I knew it'd come sooner or later.
So, I mean, that could be part of it. But I think as I watched her, because her head was almost like cocked to the side as she was watching, when she had this, it wasn't confused. She didn't look confused. She just kind of looked like, this is not going to work.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that they both had. So Sydney's trying to ignore her and cut her out, but she cares about all the people he cares about. And then they're at Lady Denham's, and they both had the same distrust, or I don't think distrust is the right word. They both had the same skepticism about this presentation. So but her edge is softer than his edge.
Yes.
And I think that's why they fit so well together, because they both have the same thoughts and feelings and essentials that are necessary, but they're both opposite in how they deliver and receive those. And I like that they had that contrast there, because they zoomed in on Sydney and then went to Charlotte and then they went to Tom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the camera work is really great in this show too.
Oh, it is. And the film editing, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we go through there, we see Edward and Clara talk. I just love how Esther says, I would rather say Clara than Clara, just because when Esther says it, it's filled with so much. And she's like, look at
vitriol.
Leeches. Yes. Leeches, Esther. We could call this one Clara. Yes. I love you, Esther.
Yeah.
Esther or Clara and Edward go off and talk. And it's Edward who suggests it, right? Yeah, because they have it set up for Esther's going to talk to Lady Denham.
Right.
And I didn't catch that the first couple times I watched it. I didn't catch that that's what was happening. I thought Edward was just being Edward. But they were jointly working to separate Clara from Lady Denham.
Absolutely, yeah.
I like that he just starts talking about the furniture and the furnishings in the house.
Like as though he's going to refurnish it soon.
Yeah. And he did say that, didn't he?
Yeah, he said yes. He intimated that when he inherited it, he was going to refurnish it and redo it, that he didn't like the style. And
I don't much care for my aunt's taste.
Yeah. Yes, that's it. And Clara was like, sort of like, well, that's if you inherit, But Esther, and I love the way Esther manipulates Lady Denham when they're sitting and talking, and says, oh, that's so charitable of you. Everyone thinks it's charitable of you. I abhor charity.
It helps no one.
Yes. and then she decides, she takes Esther's line about how what circumstances, not what circumstances, but sort of what was their agreement when Clara came, and that they have to revisit that,
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that it shows that she's not just some distant aunt they're trying to get money from. Esther actually paid attention to Lady Denham enough to understand her. And I don't think Edward had that kind of finesse with Lady Denham. I think that Esther cared enough to watch her and figure her out and understand her. I think that's what endeared her to Lady Denham in the later episodes too.
Yes.
Because she did understand her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I agree.
And so I love this episode because my husband, I haven't binge watched Sanditon in a while because we run 11 or 10 other groups. And so we're trying to watch all of those at the same time. So I haven't binged it in a while, but when I was binging it on repeat, every single time my husband came in the room, it was on the bathtub scene every single time. I don't know why it happened. It's like he had the sixth sense go off of, I should go in the living room now. And so now whenever I'm watching anything in the living room, he'll say, is that the bathtub scene? Doesn't matter what it is. He'll just say that. So now when we get to the bathtub scene and Claire's burning her arm, because the first time he saw it, he was like, what is she doing to herself? Why is she doing that? And he was horrified that she's burning her arm. So now I can't watch the scene where she's doing severe bodily damage without laughing, which makes, if anybody else was with me, they'd be a little sickened that I find that so hilarious. But that's why I think it's funny.
Yeah, that is funny.
And I love that Clara almost, she does volunteer almost despite Lady Catherine. And I think that I can't decide if she kind of felt her time was coming to an end, so she better soak up what she can now and do what she can now, learn what she can, and so she goes against what she knows Lady Denham's wishes would be. Because obviously her participating would not be what Lady Denham wants her to do.
Well, I think that she just had to show she was going to find a way to take advantage of this,
Yeah.
And she obviously did.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think she knew that was an option then.
When she when she got in there.
When she volunteered.
Like sea bathing. She wanted to try it out.
Mm-hmm.
She was willing to try out. And I love the looks between when Arthur keeps looking at Diana like he wanted to volunteer and he was waiting for her to give permission.
He absolutely was. And then even as Clara is getting into the shower, it's so creepy the way she watches Edward and Edward watches her. It's gross.
Yep.
And he even starts to smile a little bit. But I love what I don't really look at as much, but I notice is there is the way Edward looks up at him, because she almost knows. She knows what he's doing. She knows what he's watching in that moment. And I think that
say that again. Who looks at who?
Esther looks up at Edward while he's watching Clara with a smile on his face. I think she knows what he's looking at. And I think part of her is starting to see some cracks because Babington is being so nice to her at that moment and treating her with dignity. But I think also it's almost like the way she looks at him is trying to explain away, well, this is what men do.
Right.
Just kind of the expression on her face makes me think that, because she doesn't look at him angrily, but she doesn't look at him with joy either. She kind of looks at him with resignation.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, she gets upset later with him.
For helping her out of the bath. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how she says that too. So, but while she's in the bath, before she burns herself, it cuts to Old Stringer and James Stringer.
Right.
And when I talked to Rob Jarvis, we had talked about this scene quite a bit, and he had said that they aren't all real bricks in there, but there are some real bricks that he had to carry up that ladder like that. So I don't know why I was thinking it would be all styrofoam, but I mean, that would look a little ridiculous if you're just carrying all styrofoam bricks and there's no real weight to it. But I love how Rob Jarvis really made it. He's heavily winded. He's having a hard time breathing. But the other aspect that's key to that is it's the first time you see Old Stringer lose his temper on Tom. Because before that, he says, or maybe it's after that, when James is doing the pagoda, he says, that's no way to talk about your employer.
Right.
But in that moment, when he's undergoing all this extra work, he starts insulting Tom.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Mr. Parker said there may be more men. Well, they aren't here now, are they?
Right. Yeah.
What were you going to say?
And then, no, I'm going to wait until we get to the scene where he gets hurt.
Where he falls.
I have a question then. But so, I mean, I guess we're almost there, because she got hurt, got out of the bath. Then they have, what's her name is Lady Denham's all upset.
Well, even before that, there's one thing I want to talk about before that happens.
Okay.
Because while Claire's in the bath, they zero in on Edward's face as he looks at Lady Denham, and he's looking at her like Edward finds this all absolutely ridiculous, and he's not hiding at all. The expression on Jack Fox's face it's deep. I don't even know the word for it. It's not irritation. It's disgust. Yeah. It's like a deep disgust while he's watching this happen. And I don't know if that's because she's allowing this to happen or because the contraption is so new age that it's so bizarre. But I want to the reason behind the disgust there, because he directs it at Lady Catherine and then he looks away to the bath and he still maintains that look on his face.
Lady Denham.
Yeah. Because Edward's standing, Lady Denham's sitting, and he looks like this at her and he looks back at the bath and he just keeps it on his face. So I want to know the reason behind that disgust.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
But they make a point to zero in on it.
They do. I'll have to go back and look at it again.
They zoom in on his face and then they pull back. So I mean, there has to be a reason they did that.
Yeah.
And I did have a note here. Arthur and Diana's, their red faces when they come out of there, because they had that stuff sitting on their face the whole time. And then when Edward rescues Claire, they go outside. Edward says, he's performed with the miracle he's performed on our faces, but their faces have giant red splotches all over them after they get the mask off.
Arthur says, yeah.
Yeah.
You said Edward, but you mean Arthur.
I did mean Arthur, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
But it looks like their faces have been burned by the mask that he put on there.
Why? Because he got distracted trying to demonstrate for Lady Denham, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he left the stuff on there too long.
And my question too about Lady Denham there, when Clara gets hurt, do you think that that's her concern there? Do you think it's because she actually truly cares for Clara? Or do you think it's because she almost is like vindicated that, see, I told you this was going to happen?
I think it's a combination of both. I think part of it is that I think she feels responsible for Clara. And now she just says, we have to talk about the terms of your staying, right?
Mm-hmm.
After her conversation with Esther.
Yeah.
And then so then she gets hurt. And so I think she feels responsible and see, I knew this was going to happen, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then after that, before we see Old Stringer get hurt, we're walking with Esther and Edward back to their house.
Right.
Esther sees through everything.
Yes.
Not just in this situation, but throughout the whole 8 episodes. Esther is the one who notices everything. Even in episode 1, when she walks with Charlotte on the beach, she picks up the nuances of every single Parker man, and she's correct. And
she's maybe a little harsh, but yeah, she is correct.
She's harsh in everything she says, but she's not wrong.
No, that's right. Yeah, she's right on top of it.
And with Clara, obviously, we know that she had it right. She's like, when Edward says, you're not seriously saying that she did this on purpose. And she's like, are you really that naive? Of course she did.
Yeah, exactly.
Esther
is such an amazing actress. She
Charlotte
is
Spencer,
really, really good. Yeah, I'm sorry. The Charlotte Spencer who plays Esther.
Well, here's a question. I don't remember if Jane Austen even put this in her books, but are the Parkers from Sanditon?
I think they must have been, because there is at the beginning of the book, I'm pretty sure they were from Sanditon. The family was, the Parkers were.
Okay. Because I've read some fan fiction that has said that, but I'm not sure if I'm mixing fan fiction with what Jane Austen actually wrote. Well,
I know for sure in the story that they wrote to go along with the series, they talked a little bit more about that. They actually talked about a house that the Parkers lived in.
Okay.
In Sanditon. So, which is, I think, why they chose to do all this work in Sanditon, because they knew the town. They were from there.
Okay. So just now knowing that, another important note popped in my head about this episode. Sorry, I have a cold, so my throat, and this is my 3rd podcast of the day, so my throat is very dry.
Yes.
I don't usually talk to adults this much in a day. But now if Diana, and I'm going to jump ahead just a bit in this episode, but if the seaside is what panics her and makes her neurotic, I have a note that, we're going to get to it soon, when Old Stringer falls and they're in the Trafalgar house, and Sydney says to James, no one should have to see their father like this.
Right.
And if we see that the seaside makes Diana neurotic, and if they grew up in Sanditon, I wonder how their dad and their mom died.
Right.
I wonder if their father had so much intense pain or some illness that caused so much pain that made them all feel this way about this town. Maybe that's why Tom is so neurotic about making something out of Sanditon.
Yes. I think that you're onto something there. And for sure, I thought the same thing about Sydney's reaction. He must have witnessed his father in a great deal of pain.
Did he say trust me beforehand, or did he just say no one should have to see their father in that much pain? I can't remember if he said trust me first or not.
I don't think he says that, but
I think it's just implied.
If you give me a second, I'll look. Let's see.
So now we're going to get to when Charlotte brings Stringer the note while you look that up.
Yeah, I jumped ahead before. Yep.
That's fine. So she gives Tom's note, and obviously he says, I was hoping Tom would see me in person. But I think in this instance, he does have a valid reason for not going in person. I think it was actually responsible of Tom to send Charlotte with a note when he knew James Stringer needs this correspondence. I cannot be there. I actually have a legitimate excuse, so I'm going to send this along. I think that was actually a sign of responsibility from Tom in that moment,
Right,
rather than
right.
the
That
opposite.
it wasn't ignoring the fact that Stringer was looking for him earlier.
Yeah, and
He
genuinely had to stay behind with Lady Denham. Like, he couldn't get away at that time.
Right.
But I love that little glimpse of how James is talking about his dad. Because when he talks about who his dad is, yes, he wants to go farther than his dad, but you can see in that moment that he's proud of what his dad has done. And he's proud of
Right.
what
He's
his
a
dad's position is.
stonemason. Yeah. There are not that many stonemasons. I mean,
No.
it was a very well respected trade.
And he talks about his way up to that stonemason position. So Charlotte, she says that she loves all the work that's happening. It's some kind of miracle. And I think what James heard is, I love how you're handling this, James Stringer. I love what you're doing here, James Stringer. I love you, James Stringer. I think that's what he heard, because yes, he says that he's never met a woman like her, which is true. Charlotte is unlike any other. That's part of her appeal. But I don't think that there's a lot of women who wouldn't be kind of amazed at watching work happen. Yes, it's dirty, they wouldn't enjoy it, but to be a part of something new was like a popular thing. To be the first to know something, to be the first to see something, to be the first to be a part of something was a big deal. So
but they wouldn't have been nearly as into it or knowledgeable as she was. I think that's what he wanted to think, what he wanted to hear.
Yeah.
You know, because he was getting a lot of affirmation from her.
Exactly. And when he says it to her is after she says, I love all this work happening. It sort of seems miraculous. So it's after she uses the L word that he's like, I've never met anybody like you before.
Yeah, that's right. So
go ahead.
So when Old Stringer's laying on the ground, and then Sidney forces his way past the crowd to come in and help.
He's the first there.
Well, no, actually,
I mean of the crowd. Obviously, James and Charlotte.
Oh, right. First, nobody else was helping. Yeah, right. He was the first one who wasn't at the scene when it happened to show up to help. Yeah, that's right. And I love the way he helps pull the part of her petticoat off in order to take care of Stringer's leg. You know, I love that scene.
There are two things I have to say about that part right there. One is that clearly he doesn't know what he's doing in that situation, right? Because he's sort of waiting for Charlotte to tell him what to do, and Charlotte is taking charge of that situation, and Sidney's just doing what she says. So it tells you that he doesn't really know what he's doing, but he immediately jumped in to help, which gives you a character description for Sidney Parker. The other thing is when she's trying to tear off her own dress piece, I don't know if this was a Theo James thing or maybe it was part of, he's jumping the gun a little bit on his lines, but that doesn't seem like Theo James to jump the gun. So I think when Sidney Parker stands up and he kind of puts his hands out before she asks for help, like he's going to go do it, but then he pulls his hand back and he kind of goes back again like he's going to do it, and he pulls back. And then she says, can someone help me? And then he's right there to rip it off. That also is a character tell.
Right. I think that, he knows that she's going to need the help. He can see she's going to probably need the help, but he's polite enough to wait for her to help. Ask.
And he respects her enough to not just go grabbing at her dress.
Right.
And I think that shows that he also knew that, okay, she knows what she's doing. I'm going to wait for her to tell me. I know she needs this, but I'm going to wait for her to tell me. So it just adds another level to Sidney's character that I don't think people focus on enough.
Right. No, yeah, he's obviously been around a bunch of things that have happened. He's witnessed a lot of stuff. And she obviously, and it was obvious to him that she knew what she was doing. And so he wasn't going to butt his way in and take it over. And he, she knew that he needed a tourniquet on that leg.
Yeah. And how many men would allow themselves in that time to be told by a woman what to do in that situation and just trust implicitly that the woman knew what she was doing?
Yeah.
It wasn't that common then. It wasn't that common for women to do that either. So, I mean, there's that, but.
At least not women, you're right. Any women that had not grown up in a circumstance where they had to do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure she had seen lots of injuries on the farm. And
got 12 sisters and brothers. I'm sure some of them fell from a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so that brings me to the note about Sydney and his father, where he says no one should see their father like that. It does sound like he has an experience. So I do want to, that's something else I kind of want to reach out to Justin Young and be like, hey, can you give us some backstory on that? Because Theo James isn't going to give it to us anymore. So we need you to give us that backstory.
Right. And he did not say,
He didn't say, trust me.
just, this line you said is exactly what he said. He just said, no one, he didn't say anything else with that, you know. He just asked to speak to him.
Yeah.
And, you know, then and I love the way they have Charlotte, who's attending to Mr. Stringer, turn around and watch Sydney having that interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think that's her part of her softening, is because she sees Sydney she sees Sydney protecting someone else who he is wholly unrelated to. She's never seen Sydney and James talk, but yet Sydney is still trying to protect James.
Right. And Theo James, in the interview that he did, said, you know, that this is where they start to see that she is an able person, a capable person. Mm-hmm. And she sees of him that he is able to sympathize and to care for someone besides himself.
Yeah. What is that, the interview that they did for Masterpiece?
Yep, one of those.
I'll have to go back and watch that one, because that's, man, sounds like they've got some good insight.
Yeah.
I mean, you would hope so, but
and yeah.
The other thing too is that when I almost said Theo because it's James Stringer, but James Stringer goes up to the doctor and says, I'm going to paraphrase, but basically, please don't take his leg. That's his livelihood. And the doctor says, if it comes down to his life or leg, and Stringer's like, his life. And then the doctor's like, all right, let me do what I got to do. And so that too, I think it plays into when Sydney says that, because if James is in that room and he has to make that choice, I think that part of Sydney's thinking is, no son should have to make that choice for their father and then have to look his father in the eye every day, knowing that you took his livelihood away. Right. And so I think that's just another layer of protection that Sydney is giving him. So not just for the pain aspect, but also protecting him for, I think Sydney, that shows some foresight, some really deep foresight in Sydney's character, that you don't want later on in life, you don't want to have to make that decision. You don't want to have to be faced with that decision.
And he promises, he says, we'll take care of him. I promise you.
And he's true to his word. Mm-hmm. He stays in there after Charlotte leaves the room.
Right. Right. And one of the other things that happens is when Dr. Fuchs says to Charlotte, you might want to turn your head. And she's like, I'm not afraid of a little blood. Well, you know, that was very impressive to Sydney.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And then after that, because that was so impressive, I think after that, you see the note I said is Sydney seems to get comfort from Charlotte before the doctor starts to do his work.
Right. And follows her instructions. I mean, yeah. When hold his hand, now hold him down, you know.
I think too that another note about Sydney and Charlotte in this scene is that before they start working that scene where he seems to get comfort from her, there's that nod that Sydney gives to her, like, okay, I'm ready to go. So it's almost like Charlotte's checking on him to say, like, are you okay here? And he nods to say, yep, I'm okay, let's go. And then they start.
Right. And I'm with you.
Mm-hmm. And like when I was talking to some of the people that I interviewed, and I think you and I even talked about this, that so much of this show is nonverbal.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. And you see that a connection is made right in that moment. And that's when you really see they don't need words to understand each other. They actually understand each other right then.
Absolutely. And in one of the PBS clips that they did in interviews, it's called Unspoken. And that's the one where Andrew Davies talks about the scenes that he really liked, of which are not spoken. I mean, he loved in episode 1 when they focus on Charlotte's face, mm-hmm. and she's, you know, reacting to what she's been told to her. And then the scene, you know, in the rowing scene, and he talks about some of his favorite scenes are when there are no lines.
I'm gonna have to, if it's called Unspoken.
I'll
have to look that one up.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next scene, Charlotte goes outside, right? And James immediately grabs her hands.
Yes, when she says that he's going to be okay.
Yep. And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, miss." And she laughs and says it's quite all right.
Right.
I think she accidentally just let him on right then. I don't think she
Yeah,
was leading him on, but I think that's how he took it. Because he was already
right.
starting to fall for her. And when she smiles at him when he inappropriately touches her person, she smiles and says, "Oh, it's quite all right." I think he heard, "Ooh, she likes me. This is a good thing that she's letting me touch her hands and grab her hands." And after that is when he starts calling her Charlotte.
Yeah, you're right. He obviously he is so overcome with emotion, and she understands that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, nobody's going to chastise him in that moment.
Yeah.
But obviously, he felt very comfortable with her.
And there was, I think her saying that, I think he took that as her leading. And even there was an interview, I think it was over the Instagram takeover that Leo Suter did with Masterpiece. And they brought that up, him calling her Charlotte. And they said, "Is that just him forgetting himself, or is that a form of intimacy?" And Leo Suter said, "Oh, it's intimacy."
Yeah,
So
that's right.
after that moment, I think is the moment he started to think, okay, I could have Charlotte.
But she never calls him anything but
No.
Mr. Stringer.
No, because she doesn't love him. He's a pal.
Right. But she doesn't call Sydney either. So
No, but she doesn't give James the same leeway that she gives Sydney either.
no, that's right. Yeah.
And even when they walk, when James and Charlotte walk, there's a distance between them. It's not
Yep.
huge. It's like that big. But when her and Sydney walk, I mean, they're almost touching.
Right.
So she very clearly with her body language, Charlotte doesn't say Sydney's name because she's proper.
Right.
But with her body language, she very clearly says who her preference is.
Oh, yes.
So then after that, we go into the talk in the street.
Right.
Which is delightful. And I think it's the first time they are both fully honest and open. The one note, I know that we're going to talk about this dialogue for a minute here, but what I do think about what Charlotte says to him about how you're always so unwilling to help Tom, I think she's a bit off on that. I think that's her kind of inexperience and naivete, because I think Sydney does do a lot. Yeah, he might grumble, but I think he does a lot. So I think she's off there. But I think she's spot on, obviously, with Georgiana.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, she's feeling him out. You seem hesitant to help Tom. But when he says, "I do everything I can," well, that's not true either. As we see later in this episode when he changes his tune about that a little.
But we do see too that, and I mean, obviously we don't see it until episode 4, but he comes back and they all said no. And I think he knew that they were going to say no. I think he agrees to help Tom just to ease his mind, but I think he knew they were all going to say no.
And I do think he's trying to help Tom.
Exactly.
But he isn't always really wholehearted about it. That's for sure.
Because he has him asking for money every time he goes to London. I think people would start to hate Sydney.
Right. And yeah, and he, would like him to do more than he's been doing. Yeah. But then, as we've said before, I mean, to me, Tom needs to do more.
Exactly. And I think too that Tom expects Sydney to bring in more people, but I don't think Sydney has a whole bunch of friends.
Yeah, well, it's hard to know. He probably does know quite a few people, but that doesn't mean they're close.
The more I thought about that, I think part of it is that he thinks probably that if someone like Lord Babington, who has a title, who has the prosperity, maybe if they know that Tom needs money, they won't be willing to spend the money. That maybe he thinks, because I think that's how Tom's head works, is that It has to be, because even in that scene when he talks to Sydney in episode 3, he says, well, if it's all going to be done in time by the time people come here.
Right.
So I think he thinks that if anyone of import knows he needs money, then they'll stop. I think that's why he hides it from Lady Denham too, because she'll stop giving him money if she finds out he's out.
Right. Yeah.
Mismanagement.
His appetite was bigger than, his eyes were bigger than his stomach, in the sense that he wanted a bigger vision right away for Sanditon than he had the money to do. So he's overextended.
Mm-hmm. I think that his vision for this town was good, but you can't build like that. You can't completely destroy and demolish and then build it back up without running out of money. You should do the most important things first. Go in order, do bit by bit by bit, instead of completely demolishing. And I think that's what he did.
Especially when you don't have the money.
Exactly. Because the more you get pieces done, because there wasn't anything done. It was just everything was half finished because that's all he could do. But if he were
Right.
to get like the nicest thing done first, people would come and say, oh, this is worth spending money on. I'll give money to you.
Right. And they did get it finished just in time to burn it down. But
So back to the Sydney and Charlotte conversation, he says to her, there is some small value in what you say. And I think that he kind of has the stance of that I do of not everything you say is correct, but there is most of what you say is correct. There are some things you're saying that, of course, small value is him like kind of egging her on a little bit. But
right.
I think
he
that
does
he sees,
it with a twinkle in his eye.
Yeah.
So because he sees that she is seeing through him in terms of his attitude about helping Tom.
Yeah.
He isn't 100% gun-ho, and you see that in his conversations with Tom. He's not all in. He's like helping in bits and bits, but he's not all in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we get to the really good part of the conversation.
Right.
Charlotte's response, why should I be embarrassed? I was fully clothed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he's been punishing her for that the whole episode.
Yeah. And then I love what he says when he says, very good point. Well, it was hardly fair of you to ambush me like that. Can't say get the word out. And she says, well, I can assure you it was not deliberate on my part.
Nor mine.
Well then.
I like that we just finished that in tandem. That was nice.
That was a great scene.
And I like that when he walks off after that, his is smug confidence and knowing, because I think he just, at that moment, I think he was pretty confident in how she felt about him.
Yeah.
But hers was like shy exhilaration. Because I like that when he walks off, he just kind of stares at her for a minute and then he nods and he turns off. But she kind of does this little thing where she kind of, like when you're in junior high and you got like the first crush and you kind of like smile to yourself like, oh, does he like me? Kind of thing, so there's like this shy exhilaration to her about it after that conversation ends.
Well, I think part of it's that it's like, this is the first time the man's really been nice to her.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. It's like, he actually can be nice. Wow.
What a change.
Really. And I love the sign line when he says, I invited your opinion. And actually, for once, I think there is some small value in that. And then she says, coming from you, I shall own that as the greatest compliment imaginable. What a great line.
She's not shy about, like, when she's talking to him, it's almost like I think it was Elizabeth Bennet who said that her confidence rises with every attempt to shove her down. Elizabeth Bennet, I'm paraphrasing that heavily, but Elizabeth Bennet said something like that. And that's what Charlotte's doing right there, is I think her confidence rises when she's with Sydney, because I think she kind of sees him as her biggest opponent. I mean, not in totality, but I think there is some of that because she never ever backs down from Sydney. But when she's with Lady Denham, she doesn't, even when she went to go apologize to Lady Denham in episode 2, she was holding back and Lady Denham called her out on it. Tell me what your opinion is. With Sydney, she never had to be told. Because he was rude and gruff to her from the moment he met her. And so, because at first he said, share your opinions with me. And then she did. But after how insulting he was, never again was she going to wait for that. So it's almost like her confidence was built up, even though she was not very confident in it.
Right. And even as she's speaking her opinion this time, then she stopped. He's really looking at her, and she stops towards the end. Oh, you are going to tell me, that I'm all wrong again, or something like that. Or you don't give a fig too.
Would she say you don't give a fig about what I have to say?
Right. That's it. And that's when he says, well, I invited your opinion. Well, he invited her opinion at the ball too. But,
and he punished her.
Yeah.
He punished her because she was right, though.
In action. He's realized that she is not a frivolous person.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference, is that because in season 1, she was completely right. Or not season 1, episode 1. She was completely right, and he punished her. This time, she was right, and he rewarded her.
Right.
And that's the difference, is that he at first thought she was just being frivolous the first time, but he realizes at that moment she's got merit, and she doesn't say things fleetingly. She doesn't say things without thinking about them. She says things that she truly feels deeply about.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So then the next scene is when Esther goes to see Clara.
Yes.
Which is just great.
Yeah. It's and she tries to accuse her of hurting herself, and Lady Denham won't hear any of it.
Yeah.
She's it's like, I'm afraid Esther's not capable of sympathy. That's not exact words, but something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then Esther changes her tune completely and is like, oh, I would like to read to her.
Yeah. And I like that Clara almost invites Esther to score, because I don't think Clara dislikes Esther. I think Clara respects Esther.
I think she really meant what she said in one of the episodes about we should be friends.
We
because
should not be enemies. How can we not be?
Yeah.
So I do, and I think that Clara really does respect Esther.
Yes.
Because I think Clara recognizes that they both are fighting for something because they have to fight for it. She's fully aware that Esther and Edward are out of money. And she understands.
Right.
So she knows she can't let Esther win. So she has to be the way she is with Esther. But I think she feels a kinship with Esther because they're both fighting for something, but they're fighting for it because they have to.
And they're both somewhat victims of Edward's.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think Clara is just yet, though. I think what Clara said to Edward is true, that she did what she did to avoid something else happening, but I think Clara initiated that too, in the anticipation something else was going to happen.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right.
But what she says in this episode is when, and this is one of my favorite scenes, not because it's joyous or exciting, but because it's so well done and you see real raw emotion from Clara. Lily does a great job with Clara too. I mean, obviously, could we have a better cast? Good. I don't think we could.
No.
But when Esther grabs her arm, and Clara just leans forward so calmly and says, "You have no idea what I've endured before coming here, and no idea what I'm prepared to endure to ensure I stay."
Exactly.
The way she delivers that line, it almost makes my heart break.
And it makes you really believe the character. I mean, you believe she is this character.
And I think in that moment, she's telling Esther, she's giving Esther a shot, and she's saying, "Listen, I'm not doing this because I hate you. I'm doing this because what I have to go back to is so much worse than anything you could ever do to me."
Yeah, you don't know.
Exactly. And the way she says that is so emotion packed and it's so deep. That's why I'm so glad that Claire's coming back.
Yeah, me
because
too.
Her character is not finished. And I don't think she's a villain. I don't think Clara is a villain. I think she's desperate. And I think she's desperate because she has to be. And the things that she says, like when she said, things I've learned from somebody else before, you knew the difference between a prick and a pencil.
Right.
That line she said before. How does she word that? But all these little things that she lets slip out about
she's
her
obviously
life before.
Been a victim. That's
exactly.
Sure. And she knows how to survive, and that's what she's doing.
And it was from the people who were supposed to protect her. It was her uncle.
Right.
She says that in the next scene, or in the next episode, obviously. But it was family. It was men who were supposed to protect her. So she had no other option. She was going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's just pivotal. And I think that Lady Denham is looking for any excuse to insult too in that scene where she says that about Esther. Because she didn't have to say that, but I think Lady Denham just can't let something go by without saying, "Look at how superior I am to you. I'm going to insult."
She had to put her in her place. That's for sure.
Everybody has to be put in their place by Lady Denham. And then also in that scene, did you notice that when Esther is sitting there and she like removes her hand from Clara looks very smug as Esther's standing right there. And the moment Esther leaves, her face kind of falls.
Right.
And that too is really telling, because that tells you right there, she does not hate Esther. She does not hate the people there.
And also, though, I mean, part of it's that she's in all this physical pain, I think.
Yeah. I'm sure it did hurt.
Yeah.
But I mean, you look at when she burned her arm too. She stared at it for a few minutes in like wonder.
Right.
Before she let out the scream. So you know that she's already felt that pain, but she's felt worse.
She wanted to make sure it looked as bad as, it looked bad enough.
Yeah. And I think that when she did burn it, she looked at it with wonder. She was relieved. And that's why she had that kind of look on her face, because it's okay. This is going to be bad enough. This is good.
Yeah.
But I think too that her face falling from the smugness to almost like sadness is because she's I think she's probably also tired of this fight. I don't think she
Yes.
particularly enjoys doing these things that she feels she has to do.
Right.
Go back to Trafalgar House.
Right.
And we see Tom lose it, or Stringer lose it on Tom.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, because he goes to pick up his dad and has that conversation with Tom. And the look on isn't it Charlotte and Mary both are witnessing it, and you can tell it's upsetting to them.
They look confused of why it's happening, because surely Tom would mismanage this. How can you yell at him?
Right. But I think they could see the conditions weren't what they could be. Working conditions.
Yeah. I don't think I feel like they didn't really notice it before because the work had continued.
Right. That's right. And they weren't there every day.
Yeah. And I think, though, that was the moment, because then, and I'm jumping ahead just a bit, and then we're going to go back. But I think that was the moment that Mary understood, okay, there's really big things that you're hiding from me. And I think that's why she peeks out of the curtain when James comes back to apologize.
Right.
Because she realized
I think so too, to see what Tom was going to do or say, And
I think that she wanted to kind of see the tone of their interaction at that moment, because him yelling at him was so out of character for James. And I think she knows James. So she knew and understood that was out of character.
Right.
And then when he leaves, they go to Georgiana, and like the lack of sympathy that she has for this injury shows her selfishness that is bred out of immaturity. And I think that's one thing that they're going to correct in seasons 2 and 3.
Yes. Oh yeah, I think so too. I mean, I hope so. I hope that of course, this is before she gets kidnapped.
Yeah. And I think that we see her start to mature after the kidnapping. Still misguided feelings towards Sydney, but she starts to mature. And I think that when we do the time jump back, we'll see a different Georgiana who's more in control and more aware of what people do to help her and how much she needs people.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to see what they do with her character. Yeah. And I agree with you. I mean, I think she will mature. And then also it'd just be interesting to see what she does with her money, because she'll have control of it then.
And then after those two talk, I didn't really find anything else of import to talk about right then, because it was a pretty short conversation they just had. And I think that was the whole purpose of it, was to show
I'm with you. Yep.
So then Tom goes back to Lady Denham and he presses to keep Dr. Fuchs. And that's the first time you actually see Tom stand up for something. And this is because it was something for righteousness. Because Tom understood that if that doctor would not have been there, and if there's something happens to somebody else and there is no doctor, he understood what it meant. So that's why he fought for it. So Tom is not wholly bad either. Tom just doesn't have the business sense to make something function the way it does, but he knows what's right and what's wrong.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
But my question is, why do you think Lady D fights it so bad? Because, I mean, it could help. Is it because it wasn't her idea?
Because she hates doctors.
But
she says that repeatedly. Well, I don't know, but probably just because they've never helped her. She's probably one of those healthy people, that never has had to have the benefit of a doctor, and she just sees them as shysters. They just take your money, and I think that's basically where it comes from.
Well, even so, I mean, Tom says it will bring people to this town, which is what they need. So even if you don't trust doctors, why would you fight it so hard? Because it'll bring people in.
But she thinks all they need is the sea bathing, the salt water, the salt air. She doesn't see that they need this other. But and this is when she delivers that great line about
the hypochondriacs.
Yes, that a plague of hypochondriacs is suddenly going to descend upon us. Is that what you think is going to reverse our fortunes? I mean, it's such a great line.
Yeah.
And she delivers it so much better than I just said it.
Only Annie Reed can.
Oh my gosh. It's like, that woman is something else.
I was reading an article I was watching an interview that Crystal Clark, I think she was with other people, but she said, no one can deliver an insult like Annie Reed.
Yeah, that's right.
It's so true, because she does it so subtly mixed in with other things.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of the same thing is true of Esther's character, Charlotte, that Charlotte Spencer delivering Esther's lines, especially to Lord Babington. But that's later.
Well, I think I talked about on one of the recent podcasts that Esther, I think it might have been you and I in episode 2, Esther and Lady Downham are very, very much alike.
Yes.
Very much alike.
Yeah, we did.
So
that's right.
After that, we see Stringer offers a quick apology and Tom won't let him. And I think that Tom really realizes that, I think he really realizes, no, you made me understand how much we need this. But I think that also had an adverse effect. I think it sent his fears into overdrive because he saw the urgent need for more men. That accident did make him truly understand, but he also knew he was running out of money and couldn't do it. That's when he starts to get more manic because he's like, yeah, your accident made me understand we do need more men and I cannot help you.
Yeah.
And so we see that behind the curtains too then.
He promises to help, but he's just not able to.
But he also promises because he has plans to ask Sydney for more money when he goes back to London. And he thinks he's delusional enough to think that he could get it.
Yes.
But I think too that Mary, she gives Tom an opportunity to come clean after he comes in the house.
And he doesn't do it.
No. Because she says, how does she word it? She says, if there is something wrong, I wish you would tell me. Something like that, right?
That's exactly what she says. You're right on there.
And he just says everything's fine.
My dear Tom, if something is troubling you, I wish you would share it. And he says, why should there be? He doesn't really answer the question. You are far too inclined to worry, my dear.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And even when he says that, there's almost like, he's almost sad when he says that line too. It's not like jovial. It's not even like his hyperness. It's just kind of, it's pretty reserved for him. And I think that sets off alarm bells.
Right.
And then we see after that, we go into what Esther says when she goes back to the house, that Clara is no mouse. She was a rat who would chew off her own tail if it meant getting what she wants. Is that how she said it?
It means surviving.
Surviving, that's what it is.
Surviving, yeah.
And while it is true, it's absolutely true, I think Esther is not seeing. Well, I don't know if Esther's not seeing it because I think Esther sees everything. I think Esther sees her own desperation mirrored there. And I think that's why she gives up. Because I think Esther knows how determined she is to win this fight. And I think she also realized how determined Clara is in that moment because I think she realized that they were fighting for the same thing for the same reasons.
Yes, that's right. I agree with you. It's a really interesting interaction between those two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's a line that Edward delivers that I don't recognize that quote.
Oh, when he's reading the book?
The land where cypress and myrtle. It must be a line from a book or
it was from the book he was reading.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But I don't know what book he was reading.
I may have to look it up just out of curiosity.
When she comes in, he's reading it, and then he comes in and he closes the book and says, "Did you vanquish the mouse?"
Yeah.
So then after that, we get to the river. So we're almost to the end of the episode.
I know, and I love this scene.
Yes. And what I like is that when Charlotte first gets there, they zoom in on Sydney's face, and you see his eyes go all the way down and then all the way up.
Yeah.
So he gave her the appreciative once-over that that Charlotte gave to him when he came out of the water.
Right.
So I think that was the first time he's like, you know what? I'm gonna look at her now. It's my turn to look at her. I'm gonna embrace these feelings and I'm gonna let go. And I think that was the first time he actually let himself be free enough to let his masks drop to actually look at her in full. Because obviously you can't. It's not like they were wearing leggings and a tank top. You can't really see anything.
Right.
But I think he was just, his mask had slipped enough, and I think he just let it go. It was the first time that he actually let his mind do what it was going to do rather than trying to protect it the whole time.
And just softened up a lot. Of course, he's with the children. That probably helps too.
Yeah, but I don't think that plays as much of a role in how he's looking at Charlotte, though.
Oh, no, I'm sure just the interaction they had earlier is what has caused that.
Yeah. And then I also like that he is so tuned to Charlotte now that he's allowed himself to feel what he's feeling, that he notices every change in her. I love that when she just stands up and looks at the river, he's watching her and he says, "What is it?" He doesn't say, What are you thinking? He doesn't say, what's going on? He says, what is it? And he says it with such earnestness that he knows, because he's watched her and he's paid attention to her, and he's so attuned to her that he knows that she's just had something brilliant happen, because he's giving her the benefit of the doubt of, I know you're brilliant.
Well, it tells you that he's been observing her all along.
Exactly.
He just now is letting us see that. And I love when the oldest girl says, well, when they say, come and play with us, we're having a sea battle with Uncle Sydney, you have to be on our side, the girls say.
Yeah.
And the oldest one says, oh no, I guess that's when Sydney says, Miss Haywood, when she arrives, and says, you have arrived at a rather critical juncture. And Alicia says the British Navy are about to
attack the French fleet.
Yes. And we shall call you Admiral Haywood. I love that line. That little girl has delivered it so well.
Mm-hmm. And then when she says, we must beat those beastly boys, and he says,
I know.
Well, you can't. It's a matter of historical. What is it? Relevance, does he say?
Historical record. It's a matter of historical record. Isn't it,
Henry?
Yes.
And then her line, I don't fully understand that line, I don't think, when she says,
can we not read it? Rewrite our history if we find it disagreeable?
No. So I don't understand that line.
Oh, you don't? To me, it's so obvious. She's saying to Sydney, can't we rewrite our relationship together?
Oh, I thought she was just speaking I know that she's talking to Sydney, but I thought that she was just more speaking in general to things, because the way she was looking out at the water, I didn't think she was really telling Sydney we could redefine our relationship.
But she looks at him when she says it, at least the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And that's what she's saying to him,
That would explain his look.
Our history.
I'm so mad I didn't pick up on that.
That's all right.
It's not, Janice. It's not okay. But that would explain the look that Sydney gives her right then, because he understands that's what she's saying.
Yes. And now you've had a Damascene conversion.
I have. Yes. That's happening a lot in this episode. So we're getting to the fireplace now. And this is one of my favorite scenes in the series, because I think it just shows incredible acting and incredible death. And this is what Ollie said. He said it was all Chris Marshall, because and I think we've talked about this before, where Chris Marshall, this manic person, always in overdrive, always overexcited, always crazy, crazy, crazy. And you forget that he's something else.
Yes.
But that he's sitting in front of that fireplace and he is so despondent. And it's not a coincidence that it's after James Stringer's father's accident made him realize how many more men he needed to hire to protect those people. And the knowledge, I think, that he could not protect these people who depended on him wrecked him more than I think he showed. And so when he's staring at this fireplace, he just looks so despondent, and you could almost feel it.
And don't you think it's also because he just brought this doctor there, and it's not exactly been the win that he thought it was going to be?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's probably part of that, but I really think more of it is that he cannot protect these people.
Right.
And I think it goes beyond that too. I'm not going to be able to protect my family. He knows what it means if he goes bankrupt.
Yeah, he alone really understands it.
Mm-hmm. And so it just shows that it's that moment where you see Tom for what he is, a person who, like Clara and like Esther, is crazy about Sanditon because he has to be. Because he thinks that's how you get people to come, and that's how you get people to save this town, sort of.
Right. And he has to have, you were talking about Sydney's mask. Well, Tom has a mask too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it gets harder and harder for him to hide that.
Yes.
As it goes on. But then Charlotte and Sydney come in, and they tell him all about this great idea. And someone else pointed out on Twitter that when she says that they will fall in love in Sanditon just as I have, and that's the moment Charlotte looks up at Sydney, and when she says love, Sydney looks down at her.
Yes.
And I love that.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful, that whole interaction between them, that non-verbal communication is wonderful.
And it's the way they act and the way they orient themselves around each other, even physically.
Right.
It is like what you would do if you were romantically linked to someone for a period of time. Not just initially romantically linked, but like courting or really truly in love with someone. Like that's how you would interact. And they have that already. and they've only just that day started to be nice to each other, because it just shows you that they felt this way all along, but they were fighting it. And now they finally like, okay, let's go.
Right. And then Chris Marshall, of course, we just hear them come in and say that she has this idea. We don't even really hear her describe the idea, just why she had the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes in to see Mary and has this great
Big hand
idea.
moments.
Yeah. Can you not see it? The bank's teeming with spectators, the ladies attired in their finest white dresses, the gentlemen in their straw hats. Can you not see it,
Mary? I love how he says that line. It's one of my favorite things that he says. I don't know why.
Yes. Well, Marshall delivers it so well.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Marshall,
And someone had mentioned last week in the live that he's a great physical actor. And I actually said in the live, what do you mean? But he is in this scene, because he's big hand moments and he's like this, and he uses his body to communicate as much as he does his words.
Yes, he's very animated.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
And then I love the way, Sydney sticks up for Charlotte. It must be said that Miss Haywood deserves some credit. And then she's
the way she reacts is so indicative of how much she understands both Tom and Sydney.
Right. Yeah, and she's like, well, I merely provided the kernel of the idea,
No, isn't that what Tom says? Does he say?
Oh, no, so after Sydney says what he says, then Charlotte says, oh, I merely provided the kernel of the idea. It is Mr. Tom who has brought it to life. And then Tom says,
it's true, Charlotte.
Yeah, Sydney's right. It was you that prompted me to have the idea.
I wonder if he actually believes that, or if because we don't see it. So I wonder if she actually led him to come to that conclusion, because maybe that's what happened. Maybe she just said these things and tried to get him to come up with the idea.
No, I think, have you
outright told him?
Had people that you worked with that you came up with an idea and they liked it so well that it became their idea?
That's true.
I had a boss that I would come up with an idea and she would be cold about it to begin with. I wait 6 months and introduce it again, and it was her idea.
Tom Parker is your boss.
Yeah.
And I love how Tom manages to be somehow both honest and embellishing.
Right.
I don't know how he manages to do that, but he does both at the same time.
Yeah.
And of course, Sydney's eyes are on Charlotte almost the entire time, which is
definitely
just delightful. And I think that the reason that Tom is so manic is not just because he has something to plan, but I think he really believes that the regatta, he's like, okay, I've got Fuchs and now I've got this regatta, so we're saved. That's it. We're saved.
He is definitely inspired.
And I really think that he thinks that this will solve all of his problems.
Well, it certainly will get people there. That's what he thinks.
Yeah. And so when we go back to when Sydney is saying, at least I leave you now in good heart.
Yes.
And I love that when he's saying this to him, he's like, no, but then he catches sight of Charlotte with the children being a surrogate mother.
Right.
And I think he's like, if she's gonna be my wife someday, I should probably take some of the things she says to heart, because that's the relationship I want. And I think that I just love that he did that.
Well, yes, and that they had just had that conversation about how, and he tried to deny that he was trying to do everything he could for Tom.
Yeah.
Now here it is again, and looking at her reminds him of what she had said and that she was right. Mm-hmm. He wasn't doing everything.
And that he loves her and respects her enough to immediately rectify.
Right, that he wanted to, because of her, he wanted to change.
Exactly. And then Tom, I love this because and Tom thinks this is so much will solve all of his problems that he says, Mary, let's go to the beach. But the last beach scene we see in this is Mary saying, basically, I don't have a husband.
Right, Tom never goes to the beach anymore. Yeah.
And now we see him return to that husband.
Right.
I think the look on Mary's face when he's talking about the regatta is she's not won over by this. She thinks, oh, great.
He's going to be more further away, not closer.
I don't think that's what she's thinking. I think she's thinking that this is not going to be what he wants it to be. I think she's prepared for it to not be successful. But Tom can't hear that, so she doesn't say that. But then when they're on the beach, I think she's choosing to ignore that because Tom is back.
Well, and maybe too, part of it is that because Charlotte's there, it gives her some hope that it'll be managed.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and as we know, that is what happened.
Yeah. And I think Mary, for the first time, really says what she means in a Mary way when he is saying, you know, that he loves her, he dotes on her, and she says, well, it wouldn't hurt to hear that more often, basically.
Right. I never grow tired of hearing it.
Yeah.
No.
And I
Which
love
is
that.
a great line.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just shows the subtlety of Mary and that she understands her husband enough to give him just the right amount of information that his brain can process and receive.
Right. And don't you love the kids running around on the beach? I mean, that is so much
no
fun.
one has a problem with it. They all love it.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And I love that Sydney also indulges them. When they run past him, he's smiling at them, and he's happy to be in that setting, and it shows you exactly what he wants.
Yes.
Which makes me sad because he's not going to get that with Eliza.
Nope.
We're not going to talk about that.
And I think one of the reasons that Theo feels that way is he knows how realistic it was for that time.
Yeah. Calling her Admiral Hayward and saying that, you know, isn't it possible neither of us thought it was wrong. I think that that she is Sydney kind of thought that Charlotte couldn't come up with any plans like before because he thought she was frivolous. So him saying that is, you know, I thought you were some frivolous, naive little girl. And I'm telling you that I know that you have value and I know that you have substance and I know that you are more than anything I ever thought of you. And for him, he's saying to Charlotte, you know, I'm soft enough for these kids and I'm soft enough to be here and to be happy around a familial environment where Charlotte thought, where he's saying, you know, you thought I wasn't. You thought I was some gruff man who didn't care about anybody but myself.
Well, right. And the other thing I'm hearing him say when he says, well, is it conceivable that we've had each other wrong, Admiral Heywood?
Mm-hmm.
He's here. He's saying he's repeating back to her what she said about, can we not rewrite our history?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that's one of the sweeter scenes in the series. Obviously, everyone likes the kiss, everyone likes the proposal, everyone likes that stuff. But I think that is maybe that and the river scene. Now that I fully understand that line, I think those are the two sweetest scenes between them of the whole series.
I agree, and that's why the next episode is so disappointing.
Like, I'm so hopeful and I have so much faith in what Justin's going to do and the other writers are going to do and what Paula's going to help them do. But there is still sadness.
Right.
My mind is trying to reconcile between the two things.
It's because, you know, it's a first love lost.
Yeah.
For Charlotte.
Yeah.
But what I mean, what happens in episode 4 of this series is
what's about to go down.
Yeah. It gets shattered, as Theo put it in that interview.
Yeah. And there was an interview I was watching with him, or reading, I think I was reading it. And they were asking him, so what do you think you have to do to get a girl? He's like, just be as mean as you possibly can to her.
Yeah. And I love that little interview thing they did where they were pulling questions out of a jar, and they said, so who would you choose, Sydney or Stringer? And Georgiana says, well, Stringer, of course, won't it be, because it's to Charlotte, because Charlotte's like, oh, that's too hard, I couldn't decide that. And she's like, well, wouldn't it be Stringer, because he's not mean to you?
I would choose Sydney.
Well, she's obviously doing this based on the first few episodes.
Yes. So I only have 3 more points to bring up because we are at the end of the episode. There's one where Sydney and Georgiana, where they both tell each other they'll try to be better. I don't think Georgiana means it
at all.
She's trying to soften him up for something, but it's weird because she's hiding everything that she's about to do from him.
And I think it's because she thinks that if he thinks I'm okay, I'm not being the bad child anymore, he'll stay away. And I'm going to write Otis, because she immediately sits down and writes Otis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, because the whole every time, and it makes me sad because Sydney truly means I'm really going to be better for you. And hers is just a complete manipulation, and it just makes me sad. You can have it so much better.
You know, as we've said before, it's like she, it's part of her survival mechanism, as well as being a teenager. But it does make me sad, all the times that she felt the need to, and the whole show up until after she's kidnapped, felt the need to manipulate and lie. Which were a lot.
And I think that it was because she saw Otis as the only one who actually cared. So I think beyond survival, I think she thought, what is the big deal if I let him? He doesn't really care about me anyway.
Well, he says to Sydney later. She says to Sydney later, "What am I guilty of? All I'm guilty of is love."
Yeah. And so she pulls up that picture of Otis, and we see Otis for the first time. And I like that they end the episode on the back of her neck, because it just, one, it's foreshadowing, but I just think it's great cinematography that just gives the audience a better idea of where it's going. Next week we have, do you have anything else you want to say about this interview? Or
no,
this episode. Okay. So I think we stuck to our hour and a half, which is pretty standard for us for a recap. I think all of our recaps have been an hour and a half. Mine alone, I think, was an hour and 50 minutes. My bad. But next week will be an interview. And I'm not telling anybody who that is yet. So that is next week. And if you listen to this full hour and a half, or maybe a little more, I'm probably going to edit some stuff out, making sure it's only an hour and a half. So if you listen to this all, I thank you for coming along with Janis and I and hearing all of this episode, and let us know what you think. If we have something's wrong, if we have it right, or if you think that we just are a little too obsessed with the show. Maybe I read things. I feel like sometimes when I talk to you about it, I'm reading way too deeply into some of the things.
Well, probably. We have to constantly remind ourselves, these are actors playing characters.
These are not real people.
They have all the intention that a real person would.
Yes, exactly. They're real to me, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. We're pretty attached to this whole cast of characters.
We are. So thank you. Tune in next week. And remember, if you want to be a part of the show, if you want to talk with me or hang out with us, let us know. Give us an email and let us know your thoughts. We want this to be fan encouraged, and we want fans to be involved. So if you like what we're doing, let us know. If you want to be involved, let us know. If you want us to do something different, let us know. And don't forget to join our Facebook group if you have Facebook. If not, you can find us on Twitter. Sanditon now has its own Twitter account under Sanditon the. So it's the Sanditon Chronicles. You can find him on Twitter. And it also has his own Instagram now, which is the.sanditon.chronicles. So search for us on one of those things. Follow our pages, and you'll get fun information and updates. And don't forget that we are still celebrating cast members. So continue to shout those out for cast members that are returning. And on that, I think we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.